This question is one that many people ask, and many people who aren't Christians would definitely ask, and one that has come up a lot in my life, just talking to people, is why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah. So we talked on Sunday about the fact
Yeah.
that life is full of trouble, right?
Yeah.
And so why is that? I think the best answer to that is a question, right? And my question to anybody who asks me that back up a little bit.
Yeah.
I've said this before. I will often answer a question like that by saying, do you want me to answer this question with the truth or with what makes you feel good?
What makes me feel good?
Okay, so
Yeah.
so the truth is where we want to go. So my question would be, why does it matter? Right?
Because I think, I'm not going to speak for myself on this.
No, you should speak for yourself.
Well, I want to speak in... Yeah. So, okay, why does it matter? Because we might look at God and say, well, God isn't fair.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Like,
I mean, I wouldn't say that because I understand the question myself and have answered the question many times. But I think that's why it is important, is because you're like, well, this person is good, but there's bad things are still happening to them. Like, why does that happen? So when I used to work at a much larger church, one of my duties was to answer the phone when anyone from the outside of the church would call, and they'd ask any question they wanted. And one day someone called and said, I had a friend and their baby died. Why did God do that? That's kind of the same thing of this innocent baby who, never had a chance to do anything good or bad, and it did not survive. I think that's an example of that, the deep rooted sense of that question.
Yeah. So the question is a question of God's fairness.
Yeah.
So, so the question is then therefore assuming that good people deserve to have good things happen to them,
Right?
And that good people do not deserve to have bad things happen to them.
Yeah, and maybe bad people deserve bad things to happen to them.
Okay, sure. So the question is presupposing that there is a standard of good and bad,
Right?
Both for what happens and for what people are,
which is in a sense a case for a creator, because if there's good and bad, then there has to be a sense of fairness within that.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't even necessarily have to go that far. I would just simply say, well, who determines what's good and what's bad?
Right? Yeah. Exactly.
No, I'm asking, who does?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't believe that a God exists, then it is what the mass of people who are making that determination.
But see, the thing is
this is based on culture.
This question is holding God to that standard.
Right.
So how do you hold someone to a standard if that person is the arbiter of that standard?
Sure.
Right? So the question in and of itself is a little bit of a fail, because somewhere there has to be an arbiter of what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
And whatever or whoever that arbiter is that determines what is good and what is bad cannot be held to that standard, because it is the standard. And so if God is the standard of right and wrong, then God cannot do wrong. He can only do right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that.
And where is the line of when you cross over from good to bad or bad to good?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Who's drawing that line?
Yeah, and that's where it all comes back to, is our understanding of who sets up the box in which we understand this, right? The framework. And if the framework is that God is beholden to our sense of justice, it's easy for us to say, yeah, how could a good God do a bad thing or allow a bad thing? But if you look at it from the God who set the framework, there is no bad thing that he does. Even the things we dislike are in his framework just. And I think one of the hard things for us is we like to look at things in terms of fairness or equity or even good and bad we define by pleasurable or discomfort. And the reality is God is holy. So I would never like to say the phrase God is fair. That's not an expectation I have on God. He is just, he is holy, and he is merciful, right? And so we love to say, how could God let this bad thing happen, and never once give him credit for all the mercies we've experienced. And the reality is, part of one of the things we believe as Christians is that all of us are wicked. All of us have sinned. And because of that, all of us deserve the wrath of God. But out of his mercy, we don't today experience the fullness of that yet.
Yeah.
but we never want to give God the credit for that. We always want to just say, why is the bad stuff happening to us? And it's like, man, that is just a fraction of what we are owed, you know?
Yeah. So having dismantled the philosophical underpinnings of the question, let's actually answer the question. So, you know, the second question is after you say, okay, so we've established that the person asking the question has this assumption that there is a standard of justice. There's right and there's wrong, there is good and there is bad, and people should be held accountable for what they do, right? So now the next question is then, okay, so if you're saying that good people do not deserve to have bad things happen to them, they should only have good things happen to them, then the converse is also true, which is that bad people should have bad things happen to them, right? So then are you comfortable with receiving bad consequences immediately every time you do something bad? Like every time you think a hateful thought about someone, maybe you don't say it even, but you just think it.
Well, we tend to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. So you know what I mean?
Right, but that's what this question does.
Yeah.
This question it's almost always asked from the perspective of I'm the good person and bad things are happening to me, and that's not fair. But the reality is that when bad things happen to those people, they very rarely say, well, I deserve this, right? I mean, I don't. I often look at it and say, well, I don't deserve that, but in reality, I do. All that to say, ultimately, though, we have this really bad standard of what's good and what's bad. So we'll go back to your example, a baby who dies. And this is where we get into that point of, do you want to hear the truth or do you want to hear what makes you feel good? Because what I'm about to say is not necessarily going to make you feel good.
Yeah.
But here's the truth. What is better for that baby? Is it better for that baby to grow up and, you know, go through life here in this broken world where bad things happen? Or is it better for that baby to be escorted immediately into the presence of God and enjoy eternity forever in the perfect presence of God? Which is better?
Option
B. Option B is better.
Couldn't remember which one we said first.
But we don't like that answer.
Yeah.
And then immediately the response to that would be, well, yeah, so maybe that's better for the baby.
Yeah.
But it's not better for me. But that wasn't the question. The question was, why did a bad thing happen to this good baby?
Yeah.
Well, a bad thing didn't happen to this good baby. A bad thing happened to us because we lost this good baby.
Yeah.
Right? But a bad thing did not happen to this baby. And so this causes us to rethink completely what we consider good and what we consider bad. Because not everything we think is good, and not everything that we think is bad. And not everything we do is good, even though we think it is.
Yeah.
And often the things we do are bad, even though we don't think they are. And even beyond all that, now we have to mix into this question the question of time. Should bad be repaid for bad immediately, or should it wait? And have that question with someone who doesn't believe in the death penalty, right? So I don't believe in the death penalty, but why do bad things happen to good people? Well, okay, you want bad things to happen to bad people, but you don't believe in the death penalty. You don't believe in life for life because you believe in mercy. And mercy says time has to sit in here between the doing of the deed and the payment for the deed.
Right.
Well, sometimes maybe the good comes later when you do good things. And the reality is for a truly good person, which doesn't really exist other than Jesus, but for a truly good person, maybe the good that is going to happen to them is going to happen on the other side of the grave. But we have to get to the point where we understand that death is not the worst thing that can happen to a person. In fact, for a person who is a truly good person, right, who is, you know, a follower of Jesus, who has the righteousness of Jesus, death is actually one of the best things that can happen to them. So, all right.
Yeah.
Enough time on that.
And I think that, you know, this is, you know, doesn't need to be said, but I would like to say it anyway, is that in a sense of someone coming to you and asking that question with a, you know, real world harm that happened to them or a loved one, it's not always appropriate to use logic in the beginning, right?
That's why I lead with that question.
Yeah, right. I think that's smart.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, like in the case of the person whose baby passed away, you know, first thing I did is, you know, just express condolences.
You know what,
and,
though?
and sorrow
There's a
for
difference.
that loss.
The situation you're talking about,
Yeah.
I have never in my life, and I've been with a lot of grieving people, I've never in my life had someone who's in grief like that ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah.
They simply say, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Right? They're not looking for this gotcha. That question, it is a logical question. It is
Why would God do this?
Right. They think it's a philosophical gotcha question. So I think the two situations are a little bit different.
They are. Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.